You bend the only good shoelace slowly. It feels too important. One wrong pull could snap it before you leave. You notice the thin lace turning pale as you tighten it, and your whole morning gets smaller. This is why one mistake can feel expensive. Not because you are dramatic, because sometimes there is no spare path behind it. You check the one spare key twice, then a third time. You notice the cool metal pressing into your palm as you close your fingers around it. The action looks simple from outside. Inside, it feels like holding the whole day by one small edge. A small loss would not stay small for long. A small mistake becomes heavier when nothing catches it. You notice a square of light sliding across the floor as you pause in the room, and it makes the empty space easier to see. If there is no second option, even a tiny delay feels louder. The problem is not the mistake. The problem is the drop after it. At work or in class, the same feeling can happen quietly. You reach for the only marker that still writes. You notice the dry tip dragging across the board as everyone waits. Nothing terrible has happened, but your body reacts as if the room just lost its second chance. That is when a normal task starts feeling personal. The shelf does not need to be empty to create pressure. It only needs to show there is one match left. You notice the small peg hanging almost bare as your hand stops before taking the part. When replacement feels uncertain, carefulness becomes more intense. You stop moving like a person choosing. You start moving like a person protecting. The umbrella is not special until it becomes the only one. You open it slowly near the path. You notice one bent rib pushing against the fabric as the handle tilts in your hand. Suddenly, rain is not the problem. The problem is having no room for the umbrella to fail. That is the shape of the feeling. Single exit pressure means one path, no safe mistake. It can happen with an almost finished eraser before a lesson, a form you cannot redo, or one quiet chance to explain yourself clearly. You notice the small eraser thinning between your fingers as you pause. The label matters because it moves blame away from personality. You are not fragile. The setup is fragile, but here's the strange part. People often call this overthinking after the pressure is already built. You notice a storage bin with one empty slot as you place the last matching piece inside. The worry did not begin in your head. It began in the design of the situation. One slot, one chance, one narrow way for the day to keep working. This is why a crowded schedule can make a tiny delay feel dangerous. You close the paper planner gently. You notice the blank squares pressed too close together as your thumb stays on the edge. If one task slips, the rest has nowhere to move. The anxiety is not about being busy. It is about having no breathing space between things. In a service corner, you might see the same pattern with a simple cleaning tool. You pick up the only usable broom after something spills. You notice the bristles bending unevenly as your hand slows down. The mess is ordinary. The pressure comes from knowing one small accident can consume time you already do not have. And this is where it changes. You begin treating ordinary objects like they carry hidden consequences. You notice your reflection bending across a small wall mirror as you pass, and your face looks more careful than calm. The world has not become bigger. Your margin has become smaller. That difference matters because margin changes behavior before failure arrives. You can feel it in a loose strap on a walking bag. You hold it still instead of fixing it later. You notice the frayed edge lifting as your fingers press it flat. The object is small, but the calculation is not. If this breaks now, what else has to stop? That question makes the body careful before the mind has words. The harder part comes later. When life has no buffer, you start living around prevention. You leave a bag half open because closing it feels like risking the wrong item inside. You notice the folded fabric pulling at the corner as your hand hovers. It does not look dramatic. It looks like hesitation. But hesitation becomes a full-time job when every mistake is expensive. A small pouch sits open in a public queue. You move the spare key from one pocket to another, then stop. You notice the key resting in the pouch like it has become larger than it is. Nothing has gone wrong. Still, your attention is trapped because one missing object could rearrange the whole day. Money can be part of this, but it is not the whole story. You open a thin wallet near a store shelf and pause before choosing. You notice how light it feels in your hand as the shelf stays quiet in front of you. The feeling is not greed. It is the fear that one ordinary choice might use up the only flexible part left. In work life, this can hide inside a schedule. You move one meeting block in a paper planner and see everything pressed together. You notice your pencil stop over a tight corner as if the page can refuse you. One change should be normal. But without open space, a small change starts acting like a threat. The same pressure can follow you outside. You check the side pocket of a bag before crossing a quiet street. You notice the fabric dip under your fingers as you count what is inside. It is not the checking that is strange. It is how much peace depends on finding everything exactly where it should be. A backup is not an escape route from responsibility. It is a place where one mistake can land without breaking the whole plan. You notice a small storage box closing slowly in the parked car as your hand releases it. The box is not impressive. But the space inside changes what the next mistake means. This is why small systems feel calming when they are honest. Not perfect, just honest. You sweep a narrow line of dust from the apartment mail area into a small pan. You notice the clean strip appearing slowly as the edge moves forward. A system gives the mistake somewhere to go. It turns panic into cleanup. You do not need a dramatic life overhaul to feel this. Sometimes the first difference is one alternate path across a wet courtyard. You notice a pale reflection sitting in a puddle as you step around it. The path is still imperfect, but it is no longer the only path. That changes the weight of the step, and that is the quieter problem. A life can look disciplined while still being brittle. You keep one spare filter in a service cabinet, not because you expect disaster, but because small breakdowns are normal. You notice the spare sitting flat inside the shallow shelf. The point is not fear. The point is room. By the end, the question is not whether you can avoid every mistake. You cannot. You stand in a calm public line and let one person move ahead without rushing. You notice the open space ahead of you as your shoulders lower. Effort changes your life only when mistakes have somewhere to land. A backup is not escape. It is room for being human.